Welcome to Trial of the Hollywood Sex Therapist Killer, the harrowing and tragic story of Dr. Amie Harwick, who met a tragic end when she was allegedly thrown off her third-floor balcony by her stalker and ex-boyfriend, Gareth Pursehouse. Found clinging to life, but later succumbing to her injuries, Amie's death has raised many questions, with answers to be revealed in court. Join us as we dive deep into the ongoing trial of Gareth Pursehouse, the man accused of this heinous act, and as we seek justice for Amie.
Matter, people, you may call your next witness.
Yes, people call Dr. Alan Wu to the stand.
All right. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah. I remember. You could raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do swear.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Alan Wu, A-L-A-N-W-U.
All right, people.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please tell the jury what it is that you do for a living.
I am a professor of laboratory medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, and I am one of the laboratory directors at the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital.
And can you briefly describe your education for this position?
I have bachelor's degrees in chemistry and biology, a doctoral degree, PhD degree from the University of Illinois in analytical chemistry, and postdoctoral training in clinical chemistry.
Can you briefly describe your training experience in chemistry?
Well, I'm trained to operate clinical laboratories in hospitals and medical centers.
And how many years have you been doing that?
41.
And are you the chief clinical chemistry toxicology laboratories of San Francisco General Hospital?
Now called the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, yes.
And do you hold any licenses or certifications?
I'm licensed by the American Board of Clinical Chemistry in both clinical chemistry and toxicological chemistry, and by the state of California for clinical chemistry.
Since when?
My American Board licensure dates to 1982 and 1983, and my California license dates to 2005, the year after I arrived in California.
And do you hold any positions in any advisory committees?
I am a member of the Medical Advisory Committee for the Northern California Poison Control Center.
What does that entail, being a member of that committee?
It is an advisory committee for the Poison Center itself, who receives calls and cases from families, from doctors, from nurses about patients and subjects who have been exposed to poisons and toxicological substances.
And is your laboratory accredited?
Yes.
Accredited so far as what?
It is accredited by the Health and Human Services Centers for Medicare and Medicaid as a high-complexity clinical laboratory.
What does that mean, high-complexity clinical laboratory?
Well, it's the highest level of certification that HHS grants. It allows us to do testing that is above and beyond automated procedures.
And back in May of 2002, did LAPD detectives contact you to conduct analysis on what they believed was nicotine?
Yes.
And did they ask you whether you can determine the quantity of nicotine, the purity of nicotine in that vial?
Yes.
And did you indicate that you could do that?
Yes.
And how would you be able to do that?
We used instrumentation that allows us to quantitate levels of drugs, poisons, and toxins and chemicals found in various fluids.
And what type of instruments do you use to do that?
In our particular situation, we use high-resolution time-of-flight, liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry.
And is that a generally accepted method of using that instrument to conduct that type of analysis?
You need to clarify what type of analysis are you referring to?
For the purity of the nicotine.
We use this instrument for medical purposes. We test blood, urine, other types of biological fluids. We have also used it to determine purity, but that is not what we normally do.
But you're able to do it?
Yes.
And prior to your analysis, did you receive from the prosecution reports from a Dr. Maureen Bradley?
I did.
Okay. And these are reports related to her analysis back in August of 25th, 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that Dr. Bradley was an analyst at the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia.
Okay. And you read her notes on her analysis of the liquid? You can answer that.
Yes, I did.
Including that she determined that the liquid was nicotine.
That is correct.
He's testifying as an expert in this category, in this field. A lot. You can rely on reports and hearsay.
And you took that into consideration for your analysis, too?
Yes, I read her reports, and we followed some of the procedures that she used in generating her report 2 years earlier.
And sometime around May 2nd, 2002, did you receive an item 66, 2 vials?
Yes.
Did you take a picture of the envelope of item number 66?
Yes.
I actually have a one-page photograph, and just remind people's next in order, people's number
60.
60.
Yes.
Looking here at people's 60. Do you see that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Did you take that photograph?
Yes.
And the number 66 for the item number?
It's not well written. The first 6 could be construed as an 8, but I believe with other documents that is number 66.
And it's a package with Amie Harwick and a DR number of 2006-06220.
Correct.
Now, when you received these 2 vials, you didn't know where these vials came from.
Well, I knew they came from ultimately the laboratory at Quantico that had been sent to the LAPD evidence desk. Don't know the official name. So it ultimately came from the LAPD, but I think the origin was the Quantico laboratory.
Yes, and that's based on your review of Dr. Bradley's notes.
Correct.
And so you received these 2 vials for item 66, and you tested them.
I did.
And how did you test them?
Using the aforementioned instrumentation.
And what did you determine as far as item 66?
There was no compounds of interest found in it. It appeared to be just perhaps liquid water. There was nothing in it.
Okay. And did you contact LAPD to let them know that?
I did.
And did they send you something else?
Well, we had a conversation, and I believe one of the people I spoke to was an officer, Masterson.
Detective Masterson?
Yes.
Okay.
And he went through the records and concluded that the LAPD evidence office had sent the wrong vial.
Did they then send you the vials for item 21?
They did.
And did you take photographs of that package?
Yes.
Look, you want to have another series of photographs A through D, and this be marked as people's number 61.
Yes.
Looking at 61A, 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 Do you recognize what's shown there?
It's a photograph that I took.
And this is for a package with an item 21.
It's correct. It's listed in two places. The one just to the left also says item, and then it says 35 crossed out, and some date and initial, the best I can see. And then written to the right of that is again item number 21.
Now, did you receive this package sometime around July 11th, 2002?
Yes, that would be roughly 2 months after I received item number 66 through the same LAPD.
And you see this number here, the sticker on People's 61A, where it's a sticker that has the labeling packaging A1 2020-00954 number 1.
I see that.
Okay, is that a lab report number for the FBI that was used by Dr. Bradley in analyzing a liquid from a syringe that was provided to her?
I believe so. I compared her notes, handwritten notes, as well as the written report on her analysis of this material, and those numbers appear to agree.
Looking at page B of this exhibit, did you take photographs of the contents of that envelope that we just showed the jury?
Yes.
And can you tell us what is shown here?
Well, there's two things in this particular photograph. One is an outer envelope, or rather outer sleeve, which when I received the evidence, contained the syringe inside the sleeve. I opened it, documented that I had done this, pulled it out so that I could show what the syringe looked like, and then took a picture of both the syringe and the outer cupboard.
And looking at photograph C, is this a close-up of that syringe?
It is the same syringe and outer casing with the syringe inside.
And was there also a vial in that package?
There was.
And did you take a photograph of that?
I did.
And is that here on people's photograph D of this exhibit?
Yes, it is.
And turning this around, zooming in on the labeling on the vial on photograph D. Does that have the FBI lab number 2020-00954 and then item 1 on the vial?
So I can ascertain the photo is a little bit illegible with the second digit of the 00. That is, in fact, the second digit. It is 2020-00954. And then the first word underneath is the word item. The letter I is a little bit obscured because of the angle that the photograph was taken. But I can assure you, or I can ascertain, that this, in fact, was labeled item 1.
And this is the item 1 as labeled in Dr. Bradley's notes for what she generated.
Correct.
So, what exactly did you test at this point at your laboratory?
The contents of that vial.
And how did you do that?
We took out a small amount of the contents of that vial via syringe. We put it onto a balance, a weighing device. We determined how much we withdrew, approximately 100 microliters, weighed it, and then from that point on, performed the analysis.
And can you just briefly explain to the jury, what does that analysis entail?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is to dilute the sample, because our instruments are highly sensitive. We can see specks full of drugs that can't be seen by the visible eye. If you're going to take 100 microliters of what we thought was a reasonably pure material, this would have overloaded our instrument by 1,000,000-fold. So we had to dilute the liquid content that we obtained from that vial in 2 serial dilutions to the extent that it was diluted 1,000,000-fold, 10 to the 6th.
And what was the result of that?
I'm sorry, what was the result of the dilution?
What was the result of your analysis?
Well, that was just the preparatory analysis. We then had to do the instrumentation analysis, which consisted of first ensuring that the instrument was correctly calibrated with known standards, making sure that the instrument was clean, that there was the necessary quality controls that we put in there to demonstrate that the instrument was operational. We determined that there was no carryover from any existing samples. So the first step, prior to touching anything from this evidence, was to calibrate the instrument.
And was that done?
Yes.
And you said you used a standard. What do you mean by that?
A standard is a material that we purchase that is certified by the manufacturer of that material to be what it says it to be, as well as the content and purity of the standard itself. So these are things that are documented prior to us using them.
Okay. And what standard did you use in this case?
Nicotine.
At what purity level?
The purity level indicated by the manufacturer was greater than 99.9%.
And did you, as an expert, did you believe that to be reliable, that the standard was 99% pure nicotine?
We don't verify the purity. That's beyond the scope of our work. But we've never had an issue with a substandard material.
And then, did you continue your analysis?
Once the instrument was calibrated, I might mention that this is a step that the FBI lab does not do, which was the reason that we were engaged in this work. They do not do quantitative analysis. And so we were asked to provide a quantitative analysis of the content in item number 1. It was required that we calibrate the instrument. Once the instrument was calibrated to our satisfaction, we injected the sample.
And then what happened?
Once the result has been completed, which takes about an hour, all told, including the calibration, we look at the instrument printouts and we evaluate the contents for 2 things. Number 1, what is it? And what degree of confidence do we have that it is what we think it is, i.e. nicotine? So before doing any type of calculation, we wanted to be sure that we were dealing with, in fact, the chemical in question, because had it not been the chemical in question, such as what we saw for item number 66, there was no point going any further.
And what did the printouts show you on this occasion?
We were able to demonstrate that this material was, in fact, nicotine to above the acceptance criteria that we have in the laboratory for this compound.
Okay. And did you retain records of these printouts?
Yes.
Okay. And were those included with your report?
No.
They were not. And what else did the analysis show you as far as purity?
Well, so after we've ascertained that, in fact, the material that we were looking at was, in fact, nicotine, we determined the purity of that material by comparing it, by first determining the concentration of the material that we injected into our instrument, compared it to our calibration curve, came up with a concentration, back calculated to the amount of material that we took originally from the balance, and did a calculation.
And what was the result of that calculation?
It rounded up to 87% pure.
Pure nicotine.
Yes.
Is nicotine at that purity level, is that a poison?
Based on your training experience, are you able to answer that question?
Yes.
Okay, you may.
And the answer is yes. That high of a concentration is beyond what you would ever expect to see in a cigarette or in a smokeless tobacco or any other nicotine product. This is highly poisonous, in my opinion.
And did you document your findings in a report?
Yes.
And did you date that report August 8th, 2022?
Yes.
Did you include pictures of the instrument used?
Don't believe so.
Did you include graphs for the calibration curve of the
Yes.
nicotine standard.
Yes.
Now, is your laboratory accredited to run purity exams analysis?
No.
Why not?
As I testified earlier, the purpose of my laboratory is to provide qualitative, which means unknown analysis, as well as quantitative, in other words, how much of drugs, chemicals, and substances in biological fluids. We don't generally do purity analysis, but we have done so in other cases for various medical reasons.
Does the fact that you don't have well, first of all, is there more stringent accreditation to do the analysis that you do on organic and tissue?
Objection, foundation, speculation,
Again,
accreditation board.
Are you able to answer that based on your training experience,
Yes.
even though that your lab is not accredited?
Yes.
With respect to purity. Okay, you may.
I am familiar with the standards necessary to get accreditation for forensic purposes. I have been part of other laboratories that have had forensic certification. The standards for medical certification, in my opinion, are higher. That we do more things to verify the accuracy of the tests that we provide than does a forensic laboratory. And the difference being that in a forensic environment, that you're dealing with legal issues by definition. Forensic means legal proceedings. In a clinical environment, the results of our testing are used to make medical decisions. Medical decisions that can affect a person's life, that can affect their survival. And if we get the information wrong by providing the incorrect medical decisions, people could be unduly harmed.
So the fact that you don't have an accreditation to conduct this type of forensic analysis, does that affect the accuracy of your results in any way?
We use the exact same procedures as accredited forensic laboratories, whether they be in the medical examiner's office or a FBI laboratory. The methodologies are the same, the principles are the same. We just only sought certification for clinical testing.
And what is your fee to work on a case like this, your hourly rate?
Well, there is a fee for conducting the analyses, which is separate from what I'm doing now. My expert testimony and opinions on this case, I charge $400 an hour.
And about how many hours have you been involved in this particular case?
10.
And that's dating back to May of 2022.
Yes.
Just for clarity, you charge $400 for testimony?
Testimony, preparing reports, reviewing records, reviewing depositions, telephone calls, anything related to this case.
The same rate? Same rate as your testimony?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't differentiate.
Understood.
And were you also provided with Dr. Bradley's preliminary hearing testimony?
Yes,
And did you also review that?
several times.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
In her preliminary hearing testimony for Dr. Maureen Bradley, did you note that she gave an opinion that she believed that based on her using a 99% standard that the liquid that she tested was approximately 90 to 100%? That she said that you can infer from that it has a purity of, say, approximately 90 to 100%.
I did read that.
And what is your opinion of that opinion?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled. I mean, this witness testified to 87% purity versus what is it, Dr. Bradley?
Dr. Maureen Bradley.
Bradley's figures were, so I'll allow him to explain.
You can go
So any analytical measurement has error limits. Nothing is absolute. There are a range of values that this number could be. And I estimate it to be a few percent, 3 to 5%. Excuse me.
So your results could be, the purity of the liquid you tested could be off by 3 to 5%.
Correct. And if you add it to that 87%, it does concur with Dr. Bradley's conclusion.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Wu. You were asked in this case to test the sample for the purity of nicotine, right?
Yes.
And
Do you have water there? Okay, good. All right.
I'll give you a second.
Thank you for asking.
Well, I can relate. Believe me. I had some.
I don't have COVID.
Okay.
And I know I'm a doctor.
All right, yes.
Thank you. You were not asked to test the sample to identify all compounds in the sample.
Correct.
Your analysis revealed nicotine as the major compound.
Yes.
And there were other compounds present that were not the major compound.
No.
There was not cotinine?
No. It may have been present, but it was present perhaps in a trace amount. It's not a major component, no.
No, my question was, there were other compounds present that were not the major component.
There may have been, but we were not asked to look for them.
Right, that's all I'm asking.
Sorry.
So no, I'm sure my question was probably poorly phrased. Now, gas chromatography mass spectrometry is a generally accepted method for identifying substances.
Yes.
And it's an incredibly reliable method if done well.
Yes. Did you ever speak about the facts of your work with either of the prosecuting attorneys, Ms. Mariano or Mr. Avila, over the phone, or was it all via email? Over the phone with Mr. Avila.
Okay. Do you recall when that was?
This morning, a few days ago, a few weeks ago, multiple occasions.
Okay. Do you recall if any of those conversations were recorded?
I don't believe they were recorded, no.
In your report, you indicated that the total volume of solution that you extracted was determined by a micropipette.
Yes.
And that's the instrument. A micropipette is the instrument you use to pull the liquid from the vial, right?
Yes.
It's also the instrument that allows you to measure it, right?
Well, in this case, it was used to just extract it because we ended up putting it onto a vial that was pre-weighed when empty and weighed it. So we actually didn't use the volume taken, we used the weight.
You were CC'd on emails between Dr. Benowitz and Mr. Avila, right?
Only initially, when Dr. Benowitz recommended me in my lab to participate in this case, or invited me to consider participating, those were the only emails that I had with him.
You were aware of the role that your analysis would play in this case, though?
Vague as to the role his analysis would play.
It's a stain. Let's clean that up if you would, counsel.
You were aware that Dr. Benowitz would rely on your work on the purity for him to form an opinion?
I didn't know the circumstances of the case, didn't know who the defendant was or who the victim was. All I know was that this was a case of a nicotine analysis, and the circumstances surrounding the case were never made known to me.
You were aware that Dr. Benowitz was attached to the case in some way?
Yes, I did know that. He was the one who referred the DA to me.
And that he would review your work in preparing for his own testimony? I
don't know if he ever reviewed my work. I've never had a discussion with him, and I see him every 2 weeks.
Included in your compensation, does that include travel?
This is the only travel, and I have yet to invoice for the travel, so it does not.
Will that be part of it?
Yes.
You testified that, in your opinion, one of the reasons that the medical accreditation is more stringent than forensic is because that there are people's lives at stake in the medical clinical setting. Right?
Yes, I said that.
Isn't it true that there are also people's lives at stake in legal settings?
Section argumentative as phrase.
I think you use the language that people could be unduly harmed in the medical and clinical setting. And my question is, if there are errors made in the legal setting too, people could be unduly harmed.
Section argumentative and foundation.
Well, I mean, I'll sustain it in terms of foundation. I mean, you know that your results or analysis could impact, say, a legal proceeding like this.
Of course.
Okay, yeah.
And I think you answered this in kind of a big picture way, but I just want to ask very specifically that your lab does not have the ISO IEC 17025 accreditation.
That's correct.
One of the two numbers that you need to know to determine purity is density, right?
Yes.
And in terms of the equation that you use, that you included in your report, density is the bottom denominator of the equation.
Yes.
Concentration is on top.
Yes.
So to be confident that your calculation regarding purity is correct, you need to have an accurate density.
Yes.
And even a slight inaccuracy can change the purity number significantly.
Well, it would have to be an egregious error in the density, which would be difficult because most fluids have a density of about 1.00. Nicotine is in a fluid. It has a slightly higher density, but not more than 1% difference. So even if we had used the wrong density, the estimate would only be off by 1% or so.
Okay. The balance you use to measure density, it can only go out, and I'm talking about the instrument, it can only go out 2 decimal places, right?
Yes.
There are density meter instruments that go out 3, right?
And even 4, yes.
And you have those types of instruments in your lab?
We do.
Your report didn't include a measure of uncertainty.
Correct.
And it also didn't include method validation parameters.
Correct.
The calibration curve wasn't run in triplicate.
That's correct.
And I think that on direct you mentioned your own error rate, but I don't think that that was included in the report, or was it?
It was not.
Is that a synonym of error bar?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And so neither were included in your report.
That's correct.
The report didn't include sample prep information.
I think we did include it. We even showed a picture of the sample actually being weighed on the balance itself.
And nothing further.
Anything?
No questions.
Thank you, Doctor. You may step down.
We'll call Detective Wetzel to the stand.
All right.
More of the trial of the Hollywood sex therapist killer is on the way. Press subscribe now so you don't miss a moment of this riveting courtroom drama as we seek justice for Dr. Amie Harwick.